It was a cloudy day, the sky heavy with sorrow, mirroring the grief of the gathered crowd at Hannah's funeral. The atmosphere was filled with silence, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the wind as nature itself seemed to mourn her passing. Friends and family stood in solemnity, some holding handkerchiefs, others wiping away tear-filled eyes as they recalled the joy Hannah had brought to their lives. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by the loud, insistent barking of Duke, Hannah's loyal dog. The dog, known for his intelligence and uncanny sensitivity, was not just any pet. He had been Hannah's constant companion. Now, standing at the funeral, he fixed his gaze on the casket, barking as if something unseen was demanding attention. His behavior caused a stir among the mourners. Whispers filled the air, questioning what the dog could be sensing, what unseen force had taken hold of him. Duke's barking grew louder, more frantic, as though he was trying to warn everyone of something terrible. The crowd watched with unease. Some began pacing, unable to tear their eyes away from the dog's strange actions. Children clung to their parents, uneasy with the situation, while the adults exchanged nervous glances. The dog was not calming down, and it seemed as if there was something deeply unsettling in the air. Was Duke trying to communicate something? Or was he sensing a presence that humans could not perceive? Father Michael, the priest conducting the service, noticed the growing tension. His eyes darted between Duke and the casket, his own discomfort palpable. The barking only intensified as Duke refused to look away from the casket. With a shaky breath, the priest tried to regain control of the situation, asking everyone to settle down, but the barking continued. Nervously, Father Michael stepped closer to the dog, trying to calm him with a soft voice. "Come on, Duke, calm down," he said. But the dog wouldn't stop, his growls low and ominous. The priest wiped his brow, his gaze shifting uneasily between the mourners and Duke. Something in the dog's behavior made him feel that this was no ordinary outburst. "It's just a dog," Father Michael said with a nervous chuckle, but his attempt to dismiss the situation did nothing to alleviate the tension. The whispers grew louder. Some began to suspect that there was something the priest wasn't telling them. Why was he so eager to calm things down? Why was he avoiding looking at the casket? Among the crowd stood a stranger, someone no one recognized. David, a man who had recently arrived in the village, noticed Duke's odd behavior and couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Though he didn't know Hannah well, he felt inexplicably drawn to the dog's distress. Solving mysteries had always been his passion, and he quickly deduced that Duke was trying to tell them something. David stood up, adjusting his coat, and approached the dog. "What are you trying to show us?" he murmured softly, as Duke stopped barking and regarded him with a look filled with intelligence and fear. For a moment, the dog seemed to acknowledge David, then began to sniff the ground, slowly moving toward the casket, as if guiding him toward something hidden. The crowd watched in silence, some murmuring about the legendary sixth sense of animals. Could Duke be sensing something supernatural, or was there a more earthly mystery behind Hannah's death? Father Michael, clearly uncomfortable, tried to take control of the situation. "Please, someone take that dog outside," he demanded, his voice shaking with frustration. But Duke refused to leave. He remained at the casket, his barking now replaced with a low growl, as if he too was aware of something the others could not see. David, undeterred, moved closer, whispering to the dog, "Show me what's bothering you." Duke wagged his tail slightly as though encouraging David to follow him. The dog circled the casket, his eyes never leaving it, urging David to look closer. As the crowd grew restless, Father Michael stepped forward, his voice stern. "This is inappropriate," he said sharply. "We are here to mourn Hannah, not to entertain nonsense." But his words only deepened the unease, especially as the priest's tone seemed more desperate than authoritative. David, however, stood firm. "I think Duke is trying to tell us something," he said, still focused on the dog. As David and Duke approached the casket together, a chill spread through the air. Some of the mourners began to wonder if the dog was indeed sensing something supernatural, something that even the priest seemed unwilling to acknowledge. Father Michael, losing his composure, raised his hands in an attempt to calm the situation. "Please, we must not allow Hannah's memory to be overshadowed by this," he implored, his voice wavering. But David, undeterred, continued to study the dog, determined to uncover the truth behind Duke's frantic behavior, no matter the cost. The mystery was only deepening, and David was ready to uncover what lay hidden in the shadows. Let us return to our original purpose, to pray for her soul and her eternal peace. However, for many, peace seemed farther away with each passing moment. The priest's words were filled with concern, but those observing closely could see the sweat on his forehead and the slight tremor in his hands, signaling a different story. A heavy silence settled over the place as everyone anxiously waited to see David's next move. Before we continue, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you love heartfelt stories. Sensing the priest's discomfort and his desperate attempt to end the conversation quickly, David decided to ask the question everyone feared. With a firm voice and his gaze fixed on the priest, he asked, "Father Michael, how exactly did Hannah die?" The church went into an uproar. Murmurs spread, and some exchanged glances, surprised by David's boldness. Father Michael's eyes widened, visibly shaken. He had already told everyone that Hannah had passed away peacefully in her bed, but David's question now echoed through the church like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples of uncertainty. "What do you mean? How did she die?" the priest replied defensively. "I found her myself in her bed. She passed in peace, sleeping," he repeated, almost as if trying to convince himself. David, undeterred, stepped forward and continued, "But why was Hannah alone, and why were you the first to find her? Doesn't that seem a bit strange to you?" The murmurs among the people grew louder. A mix of curiosity and unease spread through the church. Children watched with wide eyes, not fully understanding the situation, while some adults whispered among themselves, heightening the tension. Father Michael's face turned red, and anger barely concealed itself. He stamped his foot firmly, making everyone fall silent again. "This is absurd!" he exclaimed, his voice rising. "You are causing an uproar during a sacred moment, disrespecting the memory of such a beloved woman." Pointing at David with a trembling finger, he commanded, "Leave here immediately, you and that dog." His voice held authority, but there was a noticeable nervousness in every word. "We will not tolerate another word from you in this place." David hesitated for a moment, but then Duke let out a strong bark, almost as if challenging the priest and pushing David to continue. Sensing that he had touched on something important, David knew he could not back down. With a last defiant glance at the priest, he grabbed Duke's collar and began walking toward the door. As David exited the church, murmurs grew louder among the people, all perplexed by what had just happened. Outside, he felt the weight of the curious and suspicious glances of the community, but he couldn't leave it all behind. Something dark and mysterious surrounded Hannah's death, and a strong premonition pushed him to keep going. Duke seemed to share this feeling, wagging his tail enthusiastically, as if ready for whatever lay ahead. "Come on, buddy," David whispered to the dog. "I think we have a lot to uncover here." Together, they began their investigation through the cemetery, walking among the trees and old gravestones. The cold wind blew, making the leaves rustle and creating an eerie sound, like whispers in the unsettling silence. David looked around, increasingly sure that this place hid something mysterious. Duke sniffed the ground restlessly, as if searching for something specific, guided by an almost supernatural instinct. Determined, David decided the next step was to learn more about Hannah's life. He made his way to her house, a small stone building at the edge of the forest, surrounded by a forgotten garden. When he arrived, the door was unlocked, as if someone had left in a hurry, leaving behind more questions than answers. Inside, dust covered everything, but David noticed some objects had recently been moved. With Duke at his side, David began to explore every corner, opening drawers and rummaging through papers. It wasn't long before he found a small wooden box on an old table. Inside were yellowed letters and photographs. As he read the letters, David realized that Hannah had kept many secrets, secret meetings and conversations with people outside the village. But one specific letter made his heart race. Handwritten by Hannah, it mentioned Father Michael and revealed that she had uncovered very serious things about him. David exchanged a glance with Duke, who seemed restless, as if sensing they were close to something important. Continuing his search, David found a small key taped to the back of one of the frames on the wall. "What does this key open?" he murmured to himself. Duke let out a short bark, as if encouraging him to keep going. Next to the key was a photograph, Hannah standing beside Father Michael with the church in the background. What caught David's attention, however, was a small metal box at the bottom of the image, just as Hannah had described in her letters, mentioning that the priest hid money. "We're on the right track, Duke," David said, petting the dog. "If Hannah was trying to tell us something about the priest, maybe this key is the answer we need." With renewed determination, David held the key in his hand. He knew the truth was closer than ever. Together with Duke, they set out to uncover what the priest was hiding. David knew he had to search every corner of the village and discover what Hannah had uncovered about Father Michael. As they headed to the town library, an old building filled with dusty books and ancient documents, David searched for anything that might link Hannah and Father Michael to something out of the ordinary. After some time, he found an old photo album of the town. Flipping through the pages, David saw community events, religious festivals, and finally a series of photos of Hannah. One of them immediately caught his attention. Hannah standing beside Father Michael, her expression uneasy, as if she knew something that terrified her. David noticed a small metal box on the edge of the photo, the same box he had seen in the photograph at Hannah's house. Determined to follow the clues, David returned to Hannah's house. Behind an old curtain, he found a hidden cabinet, and inside it, a notebook, Hannah's diary. As he flipped through the pages, David's heart raced. The notes revealed something dark. Father Michael was embezzling money from the congregation for sinister purposes, secretly accumulating large sums. David's eyes widened as he absorbed each line of the diary. Among the pages, David found an envelope with more photographs. In some, Father Michael appeared in secret locations within the church, always with the same small metal box. One photo stood out, Father Michael beside an old statue inside the church, the box positioned in a way that suggested he was hiding something beneath it. "That's it," David murmured to Duke. "She discovered everything, and that's why she was in danger." Now, with the diary in hand, David knew he had to find the metal box in the church. It likely held the key to the entire mystery. With the Duke at his side, David returned to the church, determined to find the truth. The church was eerily silent as David and Duke moved cautiously through the building. He remembered the photo he had seen of the statue. The metal box was hidden beneath one of the old statues. Walking slowly, David approached a statue of a saint in a secluded corner of the church. He knelt and began to feel around the statue's base, searching for a hiding place. Then he felt it. Something was hidden there. Moving aside a piece of fabric, he found the metal box. His heart raced as he held it in his hands. Carefully, he opened it, and the sight inside made him gasp. Bundles of money, tied with labels indicating donations and tithes, filled the box. But that wasn't all. Beneath the money, there was a small key. "What does this open?" David murmured, holding the key. Then he noticed a yellowed piece of paper beneath the money. It was a map, and at the center a location was marked with a red circle: church storage. David's heart skipped a beat. This is where Hannah must have discovered something, he thought. With renewed determination, David stood up, key in hand. "Let's go, Duke. We need to find that storage." Following the map, they arrived at a small door hidden behind the altar, a door few people even knew existed. With a deep breath, David inserted the key and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into a dark basement. With a flashlight in hand, David descended the steps, Duke following closely behind. At the end of the shadowy corridor, a faint light flickered. Then David heard a sound, the clink of chains. "Hannah?" he whispered. But all he heard was the echo of his own voice. Entering the dimly lit room, David saw her, Hannah chained to a chair, pale but alive. "Hannah!" David exclaimed, rushing forward. In a weak voice, Hannah sighed in relief. "David." David was racing to find Hannah when suddenly he heard heavy footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Father Michael gripping a wooden plank with fury in his eyes. "You shouldn't be here," the priest shouted, his voice laced with anger. "I told you that you would never find Hannah." David barely had time to react as the priest lunged toward him, trying to strike with the plank. He dodged, but the blow grazed him, knocking him off balance and sending him to the ground. Desperate to defend himself, David raised his hands in an attempt to shield himself, his mind racing with one overwhelming question. How could a priest, a man who was supposed to be the embodiment of peace, be capable of such violence? Seeing him on the floor, the priest ready to strike again, but before he could, Duke, without hesitation, leapt at Father Michael, sinking his teeth into the priest's leg. The priest screamed in pain, but Duke wouldn't let go. The priest dropped the plank and tried to flee, limping as he called out for help. David quickly got back to his feet, heart racing, and chased after the priest. He couldn't let him escape. The truth had to be revealed. As Duke relentlessly pursued the priest, they reached the street where the noise of the struggle began drawing villagers out of their homes. Shocked by the sight of Father Michael, a man of the church, fighting David while Duke held him down, the villagers watched in disbelief. David seized the moment. "Stop! Everyone needs to hear the truth," he shouted. "Everyone needs to know what really happened." With the priest struggling against Duke's grip, David quickly recounted everything he had discovered: the box of stolen money, the kidnapping of Hannah, and the priest's hidden crimes. The villagers listened in shock as the truth unfolded before them. Father Michael tried to escape, but Duke held him firmly until the men of the village arrived to help restrain the priest. David then led them back to the church, opening the metal box in front of the crowd. The villagers gasped as they saw stacks of money, embezzled funds from the congregation, and a map leading to the hidden storage room where Father Michael had concealed his illegal activities. There was no doubt left. The truth had finally been exposed. With the priest captured and the evidence in hand, David led the group to the storage room where Hannah, still shaken, was locked away. Her face showed relief as she was freed, and Duke wagged his tail in satisfaction, knowing his mission was complete. The revelation of Father Michael's crimes stunned the entire village, but David knew that the priest wouldn't give up easily. As the villagers debated what to do next, Father Michael saw an opening. In a sudden burst of anger and desperation, he broke free from his captors, grabbed a piece of wood, and charged toward David, shouting with fury, "You understand nothing. You should never have interfered." David was momentarily paralyzed by the sight of the priest, a man of faith, acting so violently. But before the priest could strike, Duke sprang into action, biting Father Michael's leg with all his might. The priest's screams filled the air as he fell to the ground, thrashing to free himself. David, regaining his senses, rushed to help, grappling with the priest in a chaotic struggle. For a moment, Father Michael broke free from Duke and began limping toward the village square, but Duke wasn't giving up. The dog chased after him, barking loudly, and within moments he tackled the priest once more in the middle of the square, preventing his escape. The villagers, now gathered around, watched in disbelief, unable to fathom how a man of the cloth had descended to such a low point. David, still catching his breath, explained everything he had uncovered: Father Michael's embezzlement, the kidnapping of Hannah, and the priest's role in silencing the truth. The villagers, shocked but resolute, helped hold Father Michael in place while David took them back to the church to prove his story. He showed them the box with the stolen money and revealed a key that led to the secret storage room where Hannah had been kept. There she was found, alive but exhausted, and the relief in her eyes was visible as she was reunited with her rescuers. With the priest detained and the truth revealed, Father Michael tried to justify his actions, but his words no longer mattered. The community, once trusting and devoted, now saw the man for who he truly was. No one believed his excuses. David's bravery and Duke's loyalty had brought justice, and the village, shaken but stronger, began to rebuild on a foundation of truth. David chose to stay and help Hannah recover, becoming an integral part of the community. Duke, the hero dog, was celebrated by all, his role in bringing the truth to light now acknowledged by everyone. The village, now united by honesty, had found a new beginning, with a renewed spirit and a commitment to transparency that would guide them in the future.